I came into the ADHD field when I was diagnosed at the age of 40. So she told me, like, you got to give yourself a chance.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I not giving myself a chance? I try really hard, but, when I studied geography, I'm like, RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, is not just caused by, a traumatic experience. It's also something we feel in our body. It's biologically, innately wired that way. Feel like it's our fault. We are too much.
Yes.
And
always
that
too much.
loops in our head. It's because we are too much that they left.
Hi guys, welcome back to Dream On Pod with me, your host, Lottie Moss. And today I have somebody on who I've been dying to speak to, and I know you guys are dying to speak to her too. It is Dr Sam Hiew. She's an ADHD specialist, and for all you ADHD girlies who listen to my podcast, this is going to be a good one. So let's crack on. Welcome.
Hello, Lottie.
How are you doing?
Great.
Is this your first podcast?
No, but it's the first one. I'm on the bed.
Yes.
Ready?
We love the bed. The bed is my favorite place in the world, so that's why I do it from a bed. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, pretty good actually. I mean, talking about bed, this is the place I like to relax as well. So
Is it your favorite place too, would you say?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Anywhere where it's
Is that an ADHD thing?
no, I always thought it was a me thing. But it's
I think it's because it's very safe. It's a place that you sleep in. It feels very nice and safe. We've had so many people write in basically because obviously I'm ADHD, if you couldn't already tell. And we've had so many people write in because I've spoken about my experiences with ADHD and being diagnosed with ADHD and all of the different things that come with it, because obviously it's so different being a woman and having ADHD, and we are diagnosed much later than men. How did you get into, diagnosing people and, studying ADHD?
Yeah, so I came into the ADHD field when I was diagnosed at the age of 40. And by then,
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
40 is really late.
Yeah. I mean, but then I hear of people who get diagnosed at the age of 50 and 60, some even 70. So it's like we have so much, to catch up about what ADHD means in women. So when I got diagnosed, I was doing that typical deep dive thing, that every single woman with ADHD does.
Yeah.
And then I just end up thinking it's a good idea to create a social impact company, and then work with neurodivergent women. So I run community events to support neurodivergent women who are newly diagnosed in later in life, and also deliver training for organizations and currently mental health professionals to try and support the change that needs to happen in the system.
It is crazy because when I was at school, it was always boys being diagnosed with ADHD, left, right and center. But you could really tell that the boys had ADHD because they were flying off the walls. And this is something I spoke to, actually. I had a therapist for a long time and she was ADHD. And she didn't get diagnosed until into her 40s or 50s. And she said the same thing. It's such a shame because women mask it a lot better than men, as we do with most things.
Yeah.
But what were you doing before you got into ADHD?
So I had an existential crisis for a decade.
Oh,
where I didn't know where in the world I belong.
Yes.
And I was a scientist up until age 30, and I left the lab because
What were you studying in science?
cancer research,
Wow.
genetics, biochemistry, and then how disease manifests. So for me, everything in life happens as a process, and it was so comforting to have biology to help explain that. So then within that 10 years after I came out of the lab, I just went from one job to another. Each job lasted a year and a half. And then before I knew it, I went into 16 different industries and just didn't know how to come back, because I just seemed to have diverged and then have this trajectory that everyone else appeared to be, on. So I always felt like I didn't get the manual to life.
Yeah. It must have been amazing studying cancer research. That must have been really fulfilling.
Yeah, it was what I thought would be fulfilling. At the age of 17, I was like, really taken by the stories of cancer survivors, because when you get a diagnosis like that, it changes your entire life and it makes you reassess what your priorities are. You almost become a different person. And I almost see ADHD diagnosis late in life like that.
Yeah.
It's like a chance to really truly evaluate what you want, what's important to you. And so many of us who are diagnosed later have now gone on to do different things or maybe move into different relationships.
Yeah.
Because we realize what is really important is being authentic to ourselves.
Yeah. It's hard living with something for your whole life and not knowing why you are the way you are. And I think certainly for me, I'm not sure for you, but it really answered a lot of questions for me. I thought if I told anyone about my ADHD, I was like, oh my God, like if I told anyone like what was going on in my head, before I figured out I had ADHD, I thought, oh my God, everyone's gonna think I'm crazy. Like this isn't normal what I'm thinking. Like I thought I was lazy and I thought I was unmotivated. I couldn't understand why I had so many ideas and no ways to execute them. And I saw my friends and how they would approach lessons or tasks or exams, and I just thought, how do you have the mental capacity to just sit there, learn, go into an exam and just learn it? So like obviously you went into something which takes a lot of exams and a lot of and a lot of that work. How did you manage to focus?
Force myself. I mean, it's like it was impossible to do it at first. I nearly failed out of school at the age of 16. But then
wow,
I really didn't have a choice. I felt like, I was either going to like leave school or actually just buckle up. But nothing was really that interesting to me until I studied biology, and I had an amazing teacher. Her name is Mrs. Fun.
Oh,
so this is great. So she told me, like, you got to give yourself a chance.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, am I not giving myself a chance? I try really hard, but when I studied geography, I'm like sleep.
Because whatever we're not interested in, we don't listen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But then she made the lessons really interesting, and I was obsessed with it. And then I wanted to learn as much as possible. When I went to university, I took genetics, and I had an amazing lecturer who was a DNA man. I was from Malaysia, so he's the first DNA man in Malaysia. And so I studied with him, and then that just kind of grew and grew. And then I had other dreams, and I pursued that, and I left the country, to come here. So you have to be so passionate.
This is the thing. With ADHD, you can only do something if you love it. If you're so passionate about it, you will put so much work and effort into it. But if you're not interested in it, your brain just goes, nope, like that. This is not happening.
Yeah.
It's annoying, but it's funny because I had this therapist that she told me like ADHD is a superpower. It's funny because it's like if you really are like, you really are really creative and really like, you have so much to give, but it needs to be focused in the right place,
Yeah, exactly.
Let's speak a little bit more about ADHD and how it's affected you in general life. Because I love speaking to women with ADHD and just sort of figuring out the differences and the similarities. So how was it when you first found out?
Oh, it's interesting because when you mentioned superpower, finding out about ADHD really felt like, wow, I have this fast brain. Why do I feel so tired? At the same time. So it was like a strange realization that actually, if you can channel it, to like your potential, then, it could be a superpower or a strength. But actually, there is so much underneath that I only found out, like, say, 2 or 3 years in, from writing a book that's going to come out in October.
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah, it's called Tip of the ADHD Iceberg. But it was through writing that book that I really dived so deep into the genetics, what gave us, something that can manifest as ADHD. So it was a huge journey, but usually when you find out in the early stage, you kind of go like, it's almost like a sigh of relief.
It really, I really feel that. You're like, oh,
yeah.
It really explains so much. And I really thought like, I don't know if you kind of knew that something was wrong with your brain for a long time. And because I really did. And I thought, and I had so many other things that came with it as well, with like depression and anxiety and shame and guilt and all of this that came with it. And when I found out, I was like, all these things now make sense. Because I thought when I was going crazy, I thought for a long time that I had bipolar or borderline personality disorder, something on that scale, because my emotions were so up and down. And I would be like laughing 1 minute and then I'd be crying the next minute. And one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you is, because I'm going to find questions.
There's some great stuff in there.
You're like God to me right now. I'm like, you can answer all my questions.
Definitely.
I have struggled with substances my whole life, and I read that this is very common with ADHD. What is the correlation there, and why does that happen?
Yeah, so they're like, honestly, what we do, right, to what they call self-medicate really depends on what the people around you are doing. The culture actually half normalized, so like where I grew up, it's a very different type of managing, but over here, it's almost normalized when you're a certain age. So when we get to the teenage age, our kind of the dopamine seeking part of our brain comes online, but then the prefrontal cortex that helps us really rationalize and understand what is the consequence behind this action hasn't matured yet. So you have like an ADHDer, which, potentially has, imbalanced levels of dopamine and norepinephrine and the other neurotransmitters. They're seeking something to top up to feel like just okay, and just feel like in their body. Because you can often feel like, things are just out of control.
Yes.
Right? And you're looking for something to just help you get back, to balance. Yeah. And it might not be balanced, but it helps you feel like, you're yourself. Yeah. And after a while, it becomes a coping mechanism. And then, you realize that actually it wasn't just helping you get to balance anymore. It is actually incredibly difficult to stay in this state that, you're constantly looking for more and more because like the higher the high, the lower the low. And so then, then there are other things, that you can move to, whether it's relationship, sex, drinking, and especially the things that perhaps are normalized, for people around a certain age, because like one of the conversations I had with women with ADHD, and they were saying how like these are women around my age, and they were saying how everyone goes a bit crazy in their 20s, so you didn't even think that there's anything wrong. And the industry that you go into as well, because I used to be a commercial model as well in my within the 16 different industry. Like decided to try that. I knew like producers, people who work behind the scenes, in commercials, but so in films. They live a very kind of, hedonistic lifestyle, right? That's just the way everyone does it. And you don't think that is abnormal to it. But ADHDers may not have the same level of recovery ability as the people without ADHD,
Yeah, I really like seek that dopamine. I think as I've gotten older, it has calmed down a lot. I was so crazy in my 20s, and I think I had ADHD from a very young age. My mum says, because obviously when you go and get diagnosed by a psychiatrist, for anyone that doesn't know this, you have to be, it's a bit of a process, you have to be checked out, you have to do the DIVA test. And you need a parent or somebody who has been around you since you were younger to sort of help to match up the questions and things like that. So we both did the questions for it, and my mum put very strongly agree with literally every single question. But I remember when I was younger, there was something that I did which was so funny, that I used to, when we would leave somewhere and I'd be having fun, I didn't want to leave, and it was the biggest deal leaving. I was like, no. And I think maybe, I don't know whether that's maybe a part of the dopamine thing, that I loved the highs. Even when I was like younger, I was like, no, I want to keep having fun, I don't want to leave. Like, leaving somewhere that I was having fun was so difficult. Is that something with ADHD?
Yeah, it's around switching gears, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, when you're in that, kind of like one-way track, and then you're feeling good in there. Like, why do we need to change?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it takes like notice. Maybe your parent could have said, give about 15 minutes, just give you a bit of like a heads up. Then maybe you would have maybe approach it differently. Maybe you can bargain, and you're probably going to change your mind.
I remember I used to, when I didn't want to leave a friend's house, I would like beg them, the other mum, I would hide, I would go, no, I don't want to leave, and all of this. But I mean, I feel like I was a lot better when I was younger, and it didn't really affect me. I'd struggled learning and focusing and things like that, and things that I wasn't interested in. But I'm not very academic anyway. I'm way more creative than I am academic. So I don't know whether it was just that, but I really, really struggled to focus in class. I wanted to chat. And I'm such a talker. I'm like blah 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 blah, which is why I have this podcast.
Yeah, brilliant.
This is a bit of an outlet for me. It was more when I got into my sort of early teens, late teens, that I started to really notice it, when I was living by myself, and I had to fend for myself, and all of these basic things like washing and washing up and things like that just didn't come naturally to me. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so obviously you went through a stage of transition, right? Because that was something that, you never really had to think about before, and maybe no one really taught you how to do those things.
Yeah.
And also those things don't light you up.
They don't,
yeah,
not fun.
totally not. Those doom piles, put around a room. And, that is it's definitely a challenge for every single ADHDer is our transition when we don't have the coping strategies to deal with that life stage yet. And it is also like the mental health that comes with living alone, and having to be in charge of your own schedule and structure, but which, was fully determined by you, which then, who's going to be, the person here to plan the day today.
Yeah.
Because again, that is something to do with your executive function. Maybe, the thing is like, people with ADHD do have those challenges with what they call the executive function. It's the tasks, your day-to-day tasks, that is controlled by, the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, your brain control center. And because our development of our prefrontal cortex tend to be a bit delayed compared to people without ADHD, then, the day-to-day tasks can fully elude us until our frontal lobe fully matures, maybe at the age of 35 to 40. But there are also things that we do in our day-to-day that can actually make it worse.
Really?
Yeah. Like say if we are, self-medicating, which we need to, then, the impact, the aftermath of that, would also interfere with the ability to, plan and organize, and it will make the executive functioning challenge even harder, and the emotional regulation. But, because a lot of my work is around like humanizing, our experience. And for women especially, when we go through hormonal changes, whether it's like, puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, but also what we're doing with our lives. Like, are we, starting this contraceptive pill? Are we changing? Are we, what are the things that could interfere with our hormones? And we know that hormones, it's a huge part, sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone impact ADHDers. So estrogen, when it goes down, dopamine, acetylcholine and serotonin goes down as well. So, we may have different personality at different parts of the cycle because we are more impacted.
Do you think that with the female cycle of the hormones and our periods, do you think it makes it it's worse for women with ADHD? Do you think it's worse for them than it is for the regular woman without ADHD?
Yeah, because even without ADHD, right, women do have changes throughout the month. And, it is actually a very natural, hormonal cycle that, women has categorized into 4 different seasons of the month, like spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So you are really naturally supposed to honor those parts of the cycle, but because we live in modern life, there's so many demands, and when you add more demands as we get older, it becomes nearly impossible to just maintain that facade of, being like capable to manage life. But then with ADHD, because there is a challenge in not just producing, but also clearing those neurotransmitters. So when we have the sex hormones change, then the levels of our neurotransmitters will also change. And it goes down and then it might struggle to come back up.
Because I think we're so emotional ADHD women anyway. So add the hormones onto that, it is like the most confusing thing for your brain. Today it's my time of the month. I started yesterday and I noticed myself today. I was so angry. I was so angry. Like I woke up, I was angry at myself because I was late, and then I got in the car and then I was angry because the car didn't come on time, and then I was angry because there was traffic, and I just felt and it's funny because I got this like surge almost of like and I was like, oh my god, like I had to like stop myself. I was like, you're fine, it's not that bad, it's okay, like you're good. Talk to me about the emotional turmoil in our brains from ADHD. What is that and where does that come from? Because so one day I can wake up and I feel amazing, and then that afternoon I feel like I want to kill someone.
Yeah, we tend to have different seasons even within that day itself.
Yes.
And the luteal phase, which is where you're at right now, where we're at the time of the month, is the season where supposedly women are more truthful.
Oh.
we're we're maybe angry, but it's actually the
I
truth.
think it's too truthful anyway, so this is not good.
Even more. So maybe there are only a certain like level of I don't know, such maybe only certain types of people can be around that, you know, and that's when our mask tends to drop as well.
Yes.
You know, so then what you think as emotional dysregulation, maybe your low frustration to things that are happening around you, whether it's people or things, you know. And if we talk about science perspective, yes, your dopamine will be lower, but your general sense of well-being, you know, and like wanting to do stuff, you know, go and get stuff is maybe lower. But then the serotonin is lower too, which, you know, is the molecule of happiness. Yeah. Right. So you're going to feel like a bit like, what's going on? I'm not like, you know, for you. So if you're drinking coffee, then, you know, that's going to top it up. But also then your body may struggle to clear it. Yeah, because there's a crash from coffee as well. Yeah. Like most things that give you dopamine, there is always a come down sort of thing. And I think that's as well what really has affected me in my earlier life, where I was taking a lot of drugs, is I felt this dopamine rush. And I was very impulsive. I'm a very impulsive person, which I do think as well, not... You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that comes with ADHD, being very impulsive, because it's a search for dopamine. So anything that can give it to you, like this now. And my mum said that about me too. She said it always needs to happen now with you. It's just like, you know, if we were going shopping, okay, we need to go now. Okay, I need it to happen now. I need this dopamine rush. But when I was younger, I remember that it was such a high, because it was all these new experiences, all these new things I was doing, moving to London and going out and meeting new people. But then when I would crash, it was so low. And then I would crave that feeling again, and then it would be up again, and then it was low again. And I do feel like as I've gotten into my later 20s, I have managed to balance it out, and I find beauty in the peace now of things I enjoy is more like staying at home with my cat and and things like that. And I don't crave those impulsive thoughts anymore. I manage them a lot better, but I'm not even sure how I managed to do that. But talk to me about impulsivity with ADHD. Yeah, so I actually wanted to ask, like, if you don't mind, like, go for it. Are you medicated? No. Oh, right. Okay. No. So you're managing kind of naturally. Yeah, I'm managing naturally. Just by knowing. I have tried some of the medications, but for me, they didn't work for me. And those 2 weeks where you have to get used to them are fatal because they made me so insane, and it wasn't even worth even if I could maybe feel more normal after that, it wasn't even worth it. Yeah. I get it. I mean, they have different options. But yeah, often so many women, so many ADHDers aren't just ADHDers. You know, we have co-occurring conditions, and one of the sister condition is autism, like ADHD, and that can change the landscape, you know, in that things can become more overwhelming quite quickly for an ADHDer compared to even with someone with ADHD. So impulsivity. For us, like impulsivity, you know, can look so different. It may look like, you know, just wanting to like shop and like just spend money, which is a bane of my life. Yes, it's like retail therapy. It's like how I deal with life. I can't go shopping without spending so much more money and buying so many things that we didn't go for. Yeah, totally. And like sometimes you just go from all or nothing. Yes, you know, always. It's either like we go in a full force or it's nothing at all, you know. Yeah, definitely. Like that's me as well. But impulsivity could be the very reason that we end up looking for our drug of choice, you know, early in life. And that, you know, can look like anything, whether it's, like I said before, you know, drugs, alcohol, relationships, sex, you know, entrepreneurship, or creativity. Career, even, yeah. So there's the dopamine curve, right? Yeah. And what I learned about dopamine, and even exercise as well is a big one. Yeah. Yes, that creativity is the most sustainable dopaminergic pleasure. So like that's why when we go into creative mode, you know, that's actually a better way to sustain ourselves, you know, when we're looking for that constant high. Yeah. You know.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. My journey personally with ADHD has just been so insane. And now, like, when I speak to my other friends, and it's funny because another thing I've noticed is that we tend to stick together. People with neurodivergent, anything neurodivergent, sort of autism, ADHD, anything around that, all of my friends have it. And it's so funny because I'm like, how do we all manage to find each other here? Do you think we take comfort in maybe finding other people with the same brains as us?
Yeah, I'm sure that there is a level of empathy that goes with, I know why you do that.
Women are very empathetic in general.
Yeah.
So I think when we see ourselves in other people, it gives us a certain level of comfort.
Yeah, and also you draw to each other. Maybe there is also a protective feeling, I don't want you to get in trouble because I know what it's like, or, I want to be there for you. But then it's interesting, in relationships, it's funny that like it feels as if we're always going in search of our safe person. And then the autistic and ADHD pairing seems to be attracted to each other, because I feel that ADHD is looking for autism to kind of help, provide structure and safety. And autism wants a bit of fun, like, that they think you can get from.
Well, talk to me about the difference between autism and ADHD.
So autism and ADHD. So ADHD is very much like, you kind of throw caution to the wind. You just want like that thing to happen now. And there is less of that, oh, what happens after this,
Yeah.
And then with autism is like structure and routine. Change is horrible. Don't even go there. And things need to stay the same. And also that challenge with social anxiety is stronger with autism, and inability to understand people's intentions, to read what people need from you. And sometimes, even if you know what is needed, you may not necessarily be able to act, in the right way that's good for you. And that's why, like, a lot of like autistic individuals can, end up in like relationships where they can be sort of victimized. And so
really,
a lot of,
is that autism then?
Yeah,
they get taken advantage of more than.
Yeah, and also ADHD.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
that's crazy. I'm like, I want to go get re-diagnosed, because I always thought, like, it's funny as well, even when I read the sort of diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, I read that for a long time, and I was like, oh, this is 100% what I have, because there's so many things in there, like the favorite person. But I think that's also, is that also ADHD as well, with the favorite people?
Honestly, it's anyone. So borderline personality disorder, right? A big component of that is that, they believe that an individual with BPD has got trauma in their lives, early in their lives. And
yeah, that's
and when we have that trauma, we are going in search of safety. And how do you do that, when it's outside of yourself? And with BPD, it's often related. If you put a BPD individual on their own, they're not going to act in the same way as they would as a result of like a relationship trauma, so that always, for me anyway, what I think is like that always is the first sight of injury.
Yeah.
And I personally myself, like when I was separated, from my ex-husband and I was in another relationship, like I was in therapy when someone said to me, oh, what you're describing sounds like borderline personality disorder to me. And I'm like, what?
I was like, no.
I've only like
another one, yeah.
No, like I've only just managed 2 broken relationships with somebody who decided to bail out.
Wow.
When I was in the toughest time of my life. So
yeah.
Isn't this a normal reaction to a very stressful?
Yeah, because I really struggle with situations of change as well. So when I get left or I face rejection, for me is a really tough thing. Like a rejection for me, I hold on to for months. I recently was in a relationship in September, and there were no longer those feelings anymore with him, but I still feel this thing of rejection. And it's been like 8 months now, and I still feel this thing of he rejected me almost, I really struggle with rejection. Is that ADHD as well?
Yes 100%.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I completely empathize. Like I've been there. And
even friendships, when I sense somebody isn't vibing me maybe as much as, or if somebody isn't being as nice as they normally are, in my head I'm like, oh my god, they hate me. They hate me. I've done something wrong. It's like this constant like, oh my god, like having to be nice and having to be consistently worrying of, oh my god, are they gonna leave me?
Yeah, so there is a reason for that. RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, is not just caused by, a traumatic experience. It's also something we feel in our body. It's biologically, innately wired that way. A lot of ADHDers, actually most ADHDers, especially women, we have a stronger activation in our default mode network, which makes us ruminate, and when that rejection or, someone withdraw love, and because of women, the ancestral trauma that we've had to, kind of carry with us. We feel like it's our fault. We are too much.
Yes,
and
always
that
too much.
Loops in our head. It's because we are too much that they left.
Yeah.
But we don't think about how shit they are.
Yeah.
We know that, but then we tell ourselves a different story.
Yeah.
And that looping, is what hurts, because with switching gears. So when you're in one gear, and it can be harder during luteal phase when you're
what is this thing of like what is this loop then that you do that we speak?
It's so the default mode network is the seat of your imagination, your brains, and what they call the sense of self. And in ADHDers, they found that default mode network is switched on like almost as actively as the task positive network, the part of your brain that gets you to do the things, the tasks, And so when you're looping in your head, like, should I do this? Should I not? And then mind wander, then there's less of the chance of you like, oh, let's get this shit done,
Yeah.
And then when you're looping, like, and when you're built to loop in that persistent manner, maybe your brain has followed a certain pattern that you are going to follow when something happens to you. And so you actually actively have to come in here or get external help for you to get out of that loop.
Because I find that I go in this loop with a situation that happens or something happens, and then I go in a loop until like of I should have done that, it should have happened like this, I shouldn't have done this, and then I'll like forget about it, and then I'll go again, I shouldn't have done that, they should have done this, and it goes like that for like months sometimes. Of like something, if I embarrass myself or something, or if someone broke up with me, or if I broke up with someone, or if a friendship that ended, I'll rethink everything that happened from in my brain. Maybe it was this, maybe I did that, and then I'll leave it for a bit, and then it will come back to that, and it's so painful and so irritating at the same time.
Yes,
because it is like you're reliving these experiences all over again in your brain.
Because you don't want to. There's a part of you that knows, why am I here again? Like it's just like automatic.
You're like, and you think to yourself, sometimes you sit there and go, I don't even care. I actually don't care anymore. Like, but so why is it that happens?
Because your brain has followed a pattern, and it's going to go in that predictable pattern. Is it that your brain
is comfortable with that pattern?
Because that pattern has been set in. Whether it's through the way the relationship had been for you whilst you were in it, or it was a pattern that you recognized from your childhood, but that pattern has been set in, and it really needs your help and the help of loved ones to take you out of it, because otherwise you're going to follow the same pattern, and you're going to need to actively try and break that pattern and tell yourself, actually, I'm looping again. Okay, it really, really hurts, but actually there is hope, and the reason I'm feeling so much in pain is biological, because the default mode network actually sensitizes the anterior postula, anterior insulus, and that part is in charge of the pain you feel in your body, and so you're looping and it makes you hurt. And that is like, it's really messed up, because when you're in this loop, it's like your brain is feeding your body and your body is feeding your brain, so you're doubling down on the hurt. And so if you know this, then you know that actually perhaps the rational part of you actually doesn't want to be here anymore. And that's when you need to tell yourself that if you're like this, you need external help to like get you out, whether it's like,
therapy or
but also like just be around social situations, like I've been to amazing stuff in the last few months where I go out with my friend Leanne Muscle. She said hi.
love her.
Yeah, she's told me to go to this. She's invited me to go to this like art kind of food thing where we go and eat amazing food and actually draw. And when you're in that here and now, then you are more able to tune into your present. Or like go to
drawing is something I do as well.
Mm-hmm.
And colouring in. I have adult colouring books.
Brilliant.
They're very good. Are very calming. Even if I'm watching TV, because I need something to like fidget with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very good at sitting still or focusing on one thing for a very long time. And I noticed that you have something to fidget with as well. And it's interesting because I do this thing. I've got like almost a tick now. I go like this with my nails. Stimming. Yeah. So I do that now all the time, and it drives my mum nuts. And I can even hear it sometimes. Like I heard I was doing it like literally earlier when I was talking to you, I go like that. Like all the time, because I need to do something. So I think like what are, for some girls listening, or men even with ADHD, what are some good things to help distract yourself? Maybe if you want to stop focusing more, if you're watching TV and you want to really like lock in, or what are some good things to help you focus?
Yeah, any kind of flow state activities. I think like people like different things. Like some people might actually need to be outside in nature to be able to like, calm their mind and being mindful of what's going on around you. Then they say like you gotta notice like 5 things, that like what a certain color, or 5 things, or how certain thing sounds. And it really depends what state you're in, whether it's like when you're feeling like semi-calm but actually suffering inside, then you can do those things. But like say if it's in the moment extreme emotions, then you need drastic measures like biting to like ice and like you're putting your hand into cold water and stuff like that. But for me, like a good mindful like kind of activity is actually like going to like meditation.
Do you know what? Yeah, it's really good for you. Yoga.
Yes,
it's
yoga.
really, really good. I found.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because
I find it very difficult to sit still, and I think a lot of ADHD people do. So something that really, because I tried meditation and sound baths, and I was like, I literally am so bored. I would sit there and everyone else was relaxing and my brain was like it was just not switching off. And for me, yoga was so good because my brain was thinking, because I'm doing things, so it was going, right, okay, so next you have to do this. So it kind of calmed it down in the sense of, oh, okay, so I have one thing that I can focus in on.
Yeah.
But then I'm moving at the same time and it is relaxing, but I'm not having to sit completely still.
Yes. It's a trauma release exercise.
Yeah.
And the whole movement of that is like the whole movement actually just helps you regulate brain and body. It's not just like in the brain. I agree with you in meditation. And for me, a lot like of this kind of places that I go to really have like an element of expression to it. Like for you, like doing this podcast really helps you, like kind of express yourself. But maybe there is a part of you that feels like it hasn't been expressed and it's kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Then like say I've been to like women rage events where you kind of like scream into pillow or beat things that are not breakable. So and also just reclaiming your voice.
Yeah.
Something that's really frustrating you. How do you
Because we have a very strong inner voice.
Yes.
ADHD people, we have a very strong inner voice. There's always someone talking. There's always something going on in that. But it's hard. I find it really hard sometimes to speak about these things. So sometimes I'll come on my podcast and I'll have a solo episode where I'm speaking to the camera and I have all these things going on in my head, but then I sit there and it goes blank. There's nothing in there and I can't remember events in the way that they happen. I'm about to embark on a project which is quite exciting. I'm about to write my own book. Brilliant. And I'm trying to think about all these things that happened in my past. I can't remember. There are times where it's like 2 months or like a year. I can't remember anything. And I have to go back and I have pictures and videos, luckily, but I have to go back and watch those things to remember those things happening because they just leave my brain. And then sometimes I'll be sat there talking with a friend and everything will come back at once,
Right. So it's not that you don't remember. You just have to find a means for you to channel that out. Right? Because it might be a lock memory somewhere, know? And then, like you was talking about, like just now you're talking about like distraction and how to overcome certain things. And like there is a research that shows, ADHDers, because of our way of being, going into school and into relationships, certain events can make us feel like similarly to, say, someone who experiences post-traumatic stress disorder. And they say ADHDers are actually better at finding things, that will help them forget.
Yes.
Rather than actually addressing those things.
Yeah, distractions for me, like I watch a lot of television. So like when I wake up in the morning, I'll put TV on or music on to like distract myself. I find it very difficult to sit with my thoughts because it will be a thought that I don't want to think about or something, and then I'll just be like, oh no, I don't want to think about that, and I'll distract myself. Like, is that normal?
Yeah, it is. It is something like, it's more of a response to, the response that you have adapted to having, because of what you've had to go through in life. And, they can call that dissociating or distraction. And sometimes when we do that for decades, we can end up coming to a place in our life where we're like, but actually we're trying so hard not to feel.
Yeah.
And everything is in our head and we intellectualize and
because when we feel so strongly.
So strongly.
Everything, when we're happy, it's like you're on top of the world. When we're sad, it's like depression. When we're like upset about something, it's like rage. There is never like a normal, you learn when you're a bit older to sort of manage things a little bit better, but it is, whether or not you show it, you feel it so strongly. So like heartbreak is like devastation, like we're on the floor like, and I think that's why these distractions come, and these things are almost like fidgeting, because it's like you're trying to put your brain onto something else so you don't speak all the time, or you don't, when you're sat in a conversation and all you want to do is and so you kind of sit there and you're having to think everything through. And yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, I think like what's most important to us is having people who can attune to us, like actually just connect and understand, because like some people, I'm not just saying ADHDers or autistics or mental health, those with mental health, is that it might not serve us to fully feel the extent of our feelings. Yeah. Even in therapy, when we're bringing things up, it can re-traumatize, but sometimes maybe it's enough just to understand.
Yeah.
And then move on for that and make amends with yourself and then move on from that. Just feeling things to such extent can be devastating, for a nervous system that is so sensitive. I've actually done that and like actually forced myself to feel, and it was just horrible.
I do that sometimes as well. I'm like, right, we're just going to sit with this now. We're just going to, and there are times where it's actually quite nice and actually quite good. And then I remember I did it when I dropped something like that I'd been like, kind of looping on for a minute. And I was like, right, we're just going to sit with it and we're going to go through it in my brain, and we're just going to like let it hurt for a bit. Let's cry a little bit. Like breakups are quite like that for me. I'm like, if I let myself feel and just cry whenever I want to cry, and listen to sad songs or watch sad movies, sometimes I really feel better for it afterwards, because it stops that loop, because it's like you've just gone through it and just felt it and let yourself be uncomfortable. Like sitting in the discomfort sometimes I find to be very helpful, because it's something that we don't like discomfort. But yeah, I think sometimes it can be helpful, but as you say, sometimes it can re-traumatize and it can just make it worse, and it can bring you back to that moment and that state of what you feel,
Yeah, because they say ADHD is our minds are curvilinear, where our past, present, and future are all rolled into one.
What does that mean?
It's like you can feel something that's happened in the past as now, and then things that are in the future are also felt as now.
That's so fun.
So yeah, like everything is kind of like happening now. So if something has happened maybe 10 years ago, and then all of a sudden, if you're thinking about that thing or the person comes into your field of vision, it's as if they just been there yesterday.
Gosh, that's so strange.
It's crazy, because it's like our traumatic memory, is kind of linked to each other. And I mean, maybe not just traumatic, but also, the good experiences. But because the bad experience tend to charge our brain more.
Yeah,
and I think in some
I do find I like hold on to things a lot, like that happened in the past, like things like moments and emotions that I've felt in the past. I still feel them now.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like I've worked out like biologically what that is, but it's some of us are actually born with a variant, like a gene variant that makes us hold on to neurotransmitters for longer than other people. Well, that means that when you take medication, like, or when you take medication and you also drink like coffee, then your brain will have to clear them, but they will actually delay in clearing them. So then you have too much at any one time, and it can come off like fidgety and jittery, but also that your brain will feel like so kind of alive, for like maybe a day, and then the next day you're still feeling the remnants of it, and then you take that substance more to power up, and then it just takes you time to completely clear it out of your system. So whilst you're in that state, you can be like quite like fidgety and anxious, because too much dopamine is not good either. So like that's the dopamine like curves.
That's so interesting.
Yes, but it's stuff like that when you start medication that it's important to know what your body is made of.
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you take things like the coffee or even like cocaine as well, you become so aware and self-aware that it gives you anxiety, because you're so in your body for once. You're like, what? This is crazy. Like for me, I found like the medication that I took for ADHD, cocaine and coffee all have a similar result to me, because it's all what's it called? You'll know the word for this. It's a stimulant.
It's a stimulant, yeah.
Exactly, yes. And it's so funny. Like I honestly think I'm such a self-aware person. Like I'm so aware of everything, and I'm so aware of other people. And like when I drink coffee sometimes as well, I become so aware, and I'm like, oh my God, like it is very overwhelming.
Yeah.
To feel so in your body all at once.
Yeah, but also everything just feels like more kind of stimulated. Like your eyes can't even close when it's like so alive. Like,
you feel like you're on like drugs when you drink coffee sometimes, because you're like, you see the colours more. It's like,
yeah, completely. And we all have different brains and bodies, so not everyone's gonna suit starting on medication. And maybe if we do take them, like to go slow and low.
I think for me it really took away my personality. Like it took my silliness away. Like I kind of love my ADHD in the way that it is who I am, and it makes me a bit kooky, a bit weird, a bit like forgetful. I'm a bit ditzy, but I kind of love that about myself. Like I felt when I took the medication, I felt very serious.
Yeah.
So I was very like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I really like locked in, but too much.
Yeah.
And like there are so many things that I hate about my ADHD, where it's like I forget things, or like if I don't put something in my diary, it doesn't exist. Like, and showing up on time, like being late for things. And it's funny, my mum is now very patient with me with things. Like she came to my house once when I was moving out, and I thought I'd packed everything up. I was like, everything's packed up, it's all done. She came over and she was like, oh my God, you haven't done anything. Like there's so much more that needs to be packed up and tidied. And I was like, and she got really upset with me for it. And afterwards she came to me and she was like, I'm so sorry, because I've realised it's not your fault. And I said to her, I genuinely, in my eyes, I see everything done. In my brain, when I go, oh, I can get ready in this time, I can. But then suddenly the time goes, or I start, procrastinating with things. But when like yesterday, I was getting ready and suddenly I was hoovering the stairs. And then I went back to getting ready, and then I go back to mopping, and then I go back to doing that. It is so confusing.
Yeah, it's like that every day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you're like, your whole life becomes this, what am I going to get done today? Can I actually do anything, when I just need to clear those things first that I think is important, but actually not important.
Are there any things that for anyone with ADHD listening, are there any things, because I know we struggle with keeping tasks and time management, is there anything that you can recommend that you think has really worked for some of the women you've worked with, or some of the people you've worked with, or maybe even yourself?
Oh, you mean time management?
Time management, or keeping tasks.
So
doing things you need to do.
I'm quite an interesting species. I have this thing called persistent drive for autonomy, but they call it pathological demand avoidance, where I can set a structure for myself and then want to break that rule, because for me the most important thing is freedom to do what I need to in that moment. And if that doesn't really work for me, then I want to have the flexibility, which is why.
Is that ADHD as well?
That is both ADHD and autism.
Okay.
More autism, they say. And so for me, and then the structure becomes different. For some people, they might like that, oh, let's time box my day. Let's do like 9 to 10, I'm going to do this. 10 to 11
because some of my friends
with
with ADHD say that's the only way they can get things done, is if they do 8 a.m., wake up, 8:10, brush my teeth. 8:15, eat breakfast. It needs to be like actually
Does
like
that work for you?
every single thing you're doing. Like literally put my clothes on. Like it has to be so structured in that way, but that doesn't work for me.
So you might need some flexibility, you know, and what I've done is actually just have a list of maybe 3 or 4 things that I have to do between 9 to 12 o'clock. You know?
Yeah.
And then like I know that it actually feels a bit like a game for me so that I can tick it off, you know, and I don't have to do that in any specific
That's
order.
a bit of a dopamine rush as well. You know, I have this thing now I do that as well when I think of things, because I think of things that I need to do quite randomly. So I'll just go in my notes app and I put it in. And when I get to like tick it off, because our bullet pointers, and when I get to tick it off, you get a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
So you're like, yes, I did it.
Yeah. And for the important things in your life, like get accountability for it. You know, I have coaches to support, like I send them voice notes and then they send back, and then I have to do a certain thing by a certain time. But yeah, for me, it's so important to have flexibility. So I could actually, you know, they have all these things called focus mate or something, where you turn up and then someone else is on the other side, and then you're going to do this thing together within that hour. And I can't think of anything worse.
I've never heard of that. What's this?
It's like a body double. You know?
What?
Yeah, no, sounds very morbid. A body double.
I would love a body double.
Yeah,
she can do all the things I don't want to do.
Yeah, but they didn't actually work like that. Because the focus mate is more like somebody who's going to be there doing something else whilst you are doing something else.
So is it like if I went to go to my friend's office to sit with them while they were working or something?
Yeah, it's like parallel working, except that this person could be a stranger and you've just arranged it. Okay.
Is there an app or something?
Yeah, it's called Focus Mate.
Oh, that is so true. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and I guess it works similarly to Pomodoro like timer, you know, which is also another thing that I don't like.
Oh,
I'm like breaking all the rules here, but that's supposed to be good for people with ADHD. But for me, it's like when I hear the clock ticking and I know I have 25 minutes to do this, I'm like, I can't.
yes,
I freeze.
I'm
I
so
freeze.
the same. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I really struggle with like being under pressure. Like for me, that doesn't help. Like people stressing me out or saying that this needs to be done by, it makes me overwhelmed. Like even like sometimes like small tasks, I get really overwhelmed with it if people are like relying on me, and I'm like, oh my God, like it's because my brain immediately goes to, I'm gonna let them down. They're going to be disappointed. You're not going to be able to be good enough, you know? And I think that's another thing that comes with ADHD is like self-worth. It's like this thing of like, it's a constant struggle of like not feeling good enough because you're not getting things done or not doing things in the traditional way, and you don't have the same time management as people without ADHD, and you don't have the same, you know, a capability to, finish tasks and things like that as somebody else. Because I see people that, you know, manage to keep their house really tidy, really clean. They work 9 to 5. They manage to keep their social life in check. They have everything just seems to work out for them. And I cannot do that for the life of me. Like it is either a day of like, you know, admin, or it's either a day of work. Like I can't mix the two. I can't. Yeah, it's really strange.
I'm like you, and I think when you're like that, you're gonna find your own way, and as in like not find your own way as in alone, but find the ways that work for you. And you know, you don't necessarily you might not like the strategies that are, you know, like taken by other ADHDers, and really just don't give yourself a hard time for it, because maybe you are just meant to be more original, you know. And with the whole autonomy thing, it's important perhaps for you to know that this is what I want, and so I don't feel anxious about meeting demands, you know. And you know that's something, if you know now, then you can then, you know, like do so much in your life just based on what is more true to your way of being, you know.
So we have got some questions from some of the viewers here. So because I know I had so many questions of people asking me, I did an ADHD episode myself, they were asking me to expand on it. So now I've got someone who is professional here to really expand on it. So the first one is, I have ADHD and struggle to keep down long-term relationships. I get flighty or bored or anxious and doubt myself or my partner. This is so me. What advice do you have for not letting this ruin my future relationships, Abby?
Wow, this is such a huge question, and such a big question for women, just because we are almost innately wired to mask when we, you know, go into a relationship, and perhaps we have always done that, and now like unmasking in itself is an exercise. And I would always say, having been through many relationships in my life and now divorced and separated, and actually like my eyes are wide open when I'm encountering any kind of dating like scene and romantic relationship. It's really important to be true to yourself, because if we go into a relationship and wanting to take the shape of, you know,
the other
whatever
person,
is expected of us, or what the other person needs, and then you never ask yourself what you need,
yeah,
one day it's going to come back and bite you,
yeah,
you know, in the bum. And it's either that person may have a problem with the mask that you have become, or you have started to resent,
because we are so good at masking in the way that we can present as a person, that they will really believe it. And so when that mask starts to come down and we start to, because it's I think it's a protection mechanism as well. So when we start to get more comfortable, we start to show who we really are. And I had a little bit of a problem with that in my last relationship, where I really became super obsessed. It was like my fixation, you know, and it gave me dopamine, the relationship, and we were traveling a lot and things like that. But then as soon as I started to unmask and really let my guard down, the relationship started to fall apart a little bit, because I wasn't just catering to him anymore. I was actually starting to be like, well, actually, I want these things for myself now. And this is not flying in the way that I like, actually. You know, I'm not just the honeymoon, you know, period where I'm like, oh, I'll do everything he wants me to do. It was starting to become more like, actually, I want this and he's not doing that, you know, and that was really tricky.
Yeah, it is, especially when at the beginning of the relationship, you probably thought that you're going into that relationship for very different reasons than it turned out to be, you know, and the other person might, very big chance they might be looking to you to help them, you know, kind of fulfill that lifelong dream that was never fulfilled by their mother or father. And so when you come into that relationship with those expectations, then the other person's always going to fall below that. You know, basically relationships, we're asking a lot of it, you know, and in order for us to actually really have the kind of relationships we want, we got to be honest what kind of person we are. Does the other person match your values?
Yes,
you know?
So important. Yeah. All right, next question. I've never been sure if I have ADHD, but the more and more I read about it, the more I think I do. How do you get started getting a diagnosis, and how do I advocate for myself?
Yeah, so in the UK, bottleneck is everywhere. But if you're going through the NHS, like take the, there is a self-assessment, right? What do you call it? ASRS. It's been so long since I've done this. And so it's like the 18 questions, right? That kind of help someone determine whether they fulfill the threshold to be referred for an ADHD diagnosis, assessment. And so that is very gender biased, you know?
Yeah.
And so, well, that's a DIVA questionnaire,
Yeah.
you know, that is supposedly more female, like accessible and inclusive, but people have also said, you know, not always. And I guess just arm yourself with the knowledge and then talk to your GP, and then they will refer you on to specialist assessment. But that is a postcode lottery. And it could take, you know, as long as 10 years in some places.
I went private, so I managed to get the diagnosis.
So if you go private, then that's a lot easier, and you just contact the clinic.
Amazing. We'll do one more question. My boyfriend has ADHD. He was diagnosed when he was younger, but obviously the condition affects you differently as you get older. What's the best way to support him as a partner?
It goes back to the same thing again. Like, you're supporting him. Is that what you're happy doing? Like, kind of just that?
It's not your responsibility to support somebody else, you know. It is, but it's not, you know. I think
but they will look for it.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that she's asking this, maybe the fact that, you know, that there is that
imbalance. Yeah,
imbalance in that relationship. But, you know, to support, I guess, validate somebody, you know, like if
be
it's
patient, I think, as well.
Yeah, if it's, you know, something that we're born with, this is going to be something that will always be there. Can you accept that, you know, in their most authentic expression? Can they be authentic to themselves?
I think what you can do is, if you're dating somebody with any type of mental health problem or any type of, you know, diagnosis or anything, I think it's just to, first of all, educate yourself, and then, you know, decide whether this is something that you are willing to, you know, work around and, you know, support, you know.
Yeah. And also, are you guys a good match? If say you also have ADHD, you know, who is going to
if you have OCD and then the other person has ADHD, is that a good match?
Yes. And so at different times in our relationship, we have the different person, you know, being maybe the stable person, you know, who's going to be the one who holds the candle here. Yeah. You know, at every different times of your relationship.
Amazing. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam, for coming on. This has been amazing. And I can't wait to chat to you more off camera about this.
So great.
Thank you guys for watching. Like, share and follow.